Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the priest tree. This video is the first video of two. So in the next video I'll be talking about the shadow tree specifically. But today they announced these two trees, the priest tree, the shadow tree, also the other priest specs. But these are the two that I wanted to focus on. And in this video specifically, I want to focus on the priest tree. I've tried recording this video a couple times already, where I wanted to talk about both trees in one video, and it just went too long because I have too much to say about just the priest tree, right? Which is crazy considering that all priests have all of these options as well, not just shadow priests, right? So we haven't even gotten to the shadow part of things, and I've made videos already that are 20 minutes long just talking about the priest tree. Okay, so anyway, just very briefly and quickly for anyone who doesn't know how talent trees work in Dragonflight, you will no longer have as many baseline spells. So like right now, this one, for example, Purify Disease is a baseline priest spell. That's no longer going to be guaranteed to you. There are some spells that will be baseline. For Shadow Priests, the only two new spells that we'll have that are baseline are going to be Smite and Flash Heal. So those two spells we'll have access to guaranteed. But then aside from that, the rest of these spells will be talented. And like I said, so the priest tree is just going to be a bunch of spells that are mostly utility, mostly that class utility that we're so used to by now, which separates priests from other characters. And then your spec tree, the shadow tree, is just going to be what separates a shadow priest from all priests, right? And the same is true for whatever spec in the game that you play. So you're going to have these two trees. And each tree is going to have a certain amount of points that you can spend on the tree. And the way this tree works is you start at the top, you only have access to a couple spells, and then you can put points into them, and they give you connections to other spells going down. This seems very obvious, but bear with me. Some spells, there are different kinds of nodes. Some spells, like this one up here, Prayer of Mending, you can only put 1 point into it. There are other spells, like if we click on this one, click on Renew. Renewed Faith, for example, this is a 2-rank talent, so you can put up to 2 points on it, and it gets more powerful the more points you put into it. And then there are other nodes on this tree. For example, this one, which it blows my mind that this is even a choice, that this is still a talent and not built into priests in general, but I'll get over it. This is a choose one, a choice node, right? So you can have one or the other, but not both. Whereas every other node on the tree that isn't one of these choice nodes, you can have any mixture that you want of all of these different spells, right? So for example, you don't have to put if like on this row 2 right here, there's 5 spells. You could have a point in all 5, or you can have a point in only one of them, right? You don't have to have any amount of points in there, except you need to have 1, right? Because you won't have access to the rest of the tree unless you have a point in at least 1. So yeah, you can have any mix and match combo that you want in most of these, except there are some where, like this Body and Soul one, where you must choose between 2 options and you cannot have both, right? And I will also mention you can have neither if you want. So you don't technically have to put a point in here, but if you are going to put a point in here, you only get one of the 2, right? Okay, and then the other thing to mention about how the trees work in general is there are these requirements to hit certain levels of the tree. So we'll talk about this tree in rows. So this is row 1, row 2, row 3, right? To put any points into a row 5 spell, you must have 8 points already allocated in rows 1 through 4, in this priest tree in particular, right? That's what this red line that says 8 required means. If you don't have 8 points up here, like let's say we just go straight down to row 5, I have Power Infusion talented, which I know I'll talk about them more, but I can't choose Leap of Faith, which is directly connected to it. That's the only requirement. The other requirement is because I've only spent 5 points, right? Now if I spend 2 more and then another one over here, now I can choose Leap of Faith because I've spent 8 points. And I'll mention it's at least that many points. So if I can also spend 10, 11, 12, right? I can spend as many points as I want up here. I just must spend at least 8 to move on. And the same is true down here. I must spend at least 20 to get to rows 8, 9, and 10, right? Okay, so let's reset the tree real quick. You can do that just by right-clicking on these nodes. I'll leave a link to this talent calculator, by the way, down in the comments, or probably in the comments and probably in the description. So check those if you want to play with this yourself. Which, trust me, there are a lot of choices, so you should probably play with it if you find it interesting. So, okay, that's how the trees work. So let's look at the priest tree more in depth. So first off, there is a pretty big divide among shadow priests, and the same is true for any hybrid class, like for example, balanced druids, right? Anyway, there's a pretty big divide between people who want to just do damage and people who want to kind of bridge the gap between being a damage dealer and being a healer, right? Or some other kind of utility. And the same, and for shadow priests, that's our only choice. Do we want to heal more? Or do we want to do damage more? But for other classes like a balanced druid, it's, do you want to be more tanky maybe, or do you want to be more of a healer, that kind of thing? Anyway, so this very first choice that you have, now shadow priests can put a point into Prayer of Mending. So this is interesting in that it's going to start to bridge the gap. You have the choice, I should say, of if you want to start bridging the gap between being purely focused on DPS and being more of a DPS healer combo. And in the past, there have been attempts. People have tried to make builds that kind of bridge that gap already, like crazy Sand Lane builds, where you're playing Twins of the Sun Priestess, for example, giving PI to people and things like that. But usually what happens, at least in the past, when you try to do the best of both worlds, you just are bad at both, right? So hopefully, depending on how tuning works and depending on what people can find in these trees, what kind of builds people can come up with, hopefully there is a world where you don't have to sacrifice all of your damage and be just garbage at damage to do any kind of significant healing. Hopefully there's a world where you can find a sweet balance where you can do decent healing and also decent damage. And by decent, I mean like pretty good, not just like meh. I'm talking like significant, that's worth doing, right? Because I think that'd be really cool. And I know a lot of people hate the idea of being a simp class or being more of a support / utility person. But I think it's at least the fact that it is an option is cool. And you aren't forced into doing this. There's a caveat there that the same is true with PI currently, where you're not forced into giving away PI. It's technically your spell, so you can use it on yourself if you want. The caveat is, if you're in a guild where people will not let you play unless you give them the spell, then it is not a choice for you, right? And in these scenarios, this is one big flaw of having a bunch of choices like this, is that in the wrong guilds, in the wrong Mythic Plus groups, in the wrong PvP teams even, you will be coerced and semi-forced into not having a choice, and that just feels bad. So that's probably it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? It's really cool that for a lot of people you're going to have the option to kind of do what you want and play around with stuff, but it's really lame that for a lot of people that's going to mean they're forced into one specific build and never allowed to vary from that, and it's going to be whatever the top players decide is optimal and the raid lead tells you to do, right? So for those people, I'm sorry, but for the rest of us, I think it's pretty cool that we can start to go into this sweet balance between doing pure damage and doing some healing, some damage, some utility, that kind of thing. Okay, let's go into the talents more specifically, and I'll try to not go on so many tangents. Okay, so first off, like I said, you got Prayer of Mending and Shadow Word Death in this first row. As a Shadow Priest, you can see Shadow Word Death has no points in it. I'm at 0 points spent, and it has no limit, right? That's because you're forced into Shadow Word Death. You don't have a choice. You get it guaranteed. So it's a baseline spell as a Shadow Priest. For Discipline Priests, you get both. And for Holy Priests, you only get Prayer of Mending. You'd have to put a point in the Shadow Word Death. But for Shadow Priests, you're given this, right? Which is nice. Especially considering the bottom of the tree has some interesting things. So yeah, being forced into Shadow Word Death is pretty good, I think. It's nice that we get a free spell, basically, because that's all this is. But yeah, so you have the choice of choosing Prayer of Mending. And then in the next row, we'll start from the left and work our way right. We've got Renew, just a holy spell. Focused Mending, another holy thing. This one, for most Shadow Priests, I don't know how many people play Holy as well as Shadow, but Focused Mending is just going to increase your single target healing from your Prayer of Mending. So the first person you heal, it's going to do 45% increased healing too. And then we've got Purify Disease, which is currently in Shadowlands a baseline priest spell, and it's likely to be chosen by all priests moving forward as well. And for Shadow Priests in particular, it's likely we'll take this because, like I said before, it's the only way you can get Body and Soul, and Body and Soul is a must from everything that I've seen so far moving forward into Dragonflight. There have been no changes as far as giving us better mobility spells or ways to get around, right? We're pretty much still just super slow, going to be relying on Body and Soul. Although, we now have access to Angelic Feather, so maybe Shadow Priests are going to start taking Angelic Feather, and it'll be cool to see. It's fun that it gives you this little decision of, am I just going to speed myself up every time, or am I going to maybe speed up somebody else as well? And then it's going to feel really bad when you're trying to speed yourself up and you speed up somebody else. So maybe you end up just taking Body and Soul every time, but you're pretty much going to be guaranteed taking Purify Disease. Next, we've got Improved Shadow Word Death. That NNF just stands for Name Not Finalized, which just means that it may not be called this, but this is their idea of what's going to be here. It reduces Shadow Word Death's cooldown by 10 seconds. That's pretty big for Shadows in specific, or specifically because of this Shadow Flame Prism talent and other things. Shadow Word Death is like our hardest hitting single target spell. Aside from Mind Blast, outside of Execute and inside of Execute, it's by far our strongest single target spell. So getting a 10% reduced cooldown on this just for 1 point, that's probably worth it most of the time. Then we've got Shadow Mend. But remember, we have Flash Heal already, so Shadow Mend is less valuable to us because Shadow Mend is like essential right now because it's our only self heal. But with Flash Heal being a thing, we may end up not taking Shadow Mend, although it attaches to some cool talents. Okay, so that's the next row. Then row 3, we've got Renewed Faith, which is just like a mastery buff for your heals on people that have Renew on them. Benediction, your Prayer of Mending has a 25% chance to leave a Renew on each target it heals. We've got Improved Smite, which Smite is going to be a baseline priest spell again, so depending on how our rotation looks, you may take this Improved Smite to get more damage from your smites, right? Up to 50% increased damage according to these numbers, although, like I said, this may change. And then this one, almost guaranteed to choose one of these two as a Shadow Priest, Body and Soul or Angelic Feather. Next, we've got Mind Restrain. This one has some interesting implications where... okay, so I'll read it first. Mind Blast prevents a small amount of damage dealt by the enemy. 2 rank talent. So basically, it's kind of similar to Mind Games, which is also on the tree. Mind Games, when you hit something with it, it converts some of the damage that it deals into healing for you, right? This is just going to be a straight damage reduction. So let's say the enemy is doing 1,000 damage every 1 second. So it's 1,000 DPS. And you hit it with a Mind Blast. This might prevent, let's say, 5% damage or something. So that now instead of doing 1,000 damage, it's doing 950 damage, right? 950 DPS. And depending on how this interacts with Psychic Link, for example, this could be really crazy. By the way, Psychic Link is still a thing. This could be really crazy because can you imagine having Vampiric Touch on 20 targets? You hit one, you're playing Psychic Link, you hit one with a Mind Blast, and it puts a damage reduction on all 20 of the targets so that each of them is doing 5% less damage, let's say, and your tank, instead of taking 20,000 damage per second, is now taking 19,000 damage per second. Or would it be, I think it'd be, yeah, something like that. Anyway, I don't know numbers. Anyway, this could be huge, especially in Mythic Plus, and especially if you end up playing a Psychic Link, Vampiric Touch heavy build. This could be really, really cool to play around. And that's another reason, that's like another point of value that you bring to a team where if your damage isn't quite as good as somebody else's damage, you might still bring a Shadow Priest just because it's going to make staying alive easier. Next, we've got Masochism, which just takes the damage portion of Shadow Mend and turns it into a heal over time on yourself. And the bigger thing here is that it also reduces all damage you take by 10%. This is going to be super dope. It's very similar to Translucent Image, which is still on the tree, by the way, where you just get this free damage reduction every so often. But the difference with Masochism is that you can choose when you cast Shadow Mend, and it's not on a long 30-second cooldown like Fade has been in the past, right? So this is going to be really sweet, big defensive choice. Next, we've got Improved Mind Blast. Again, name not finalized. Mind Blast's cooldown is reduced by 3 or 7.5 seconds. I would take these numbers with a grain of salt just because it's the first draft, like I said. So there's chances that these end up being 1 and 2 seconds, for example. Or it could be as crazy as 10 and 15 seconds. Who knows, right? So this could be wildly different when Dragonflight actually comes out. But this is obviously nice. More Mind Blasts is always good as a Shadow Priest. Row 4, we've got Say Your Prayers, which just makes your Prayer of Mending it has a 6% chance to not consume a charge when it jumps to a new target. That's pretty cool. Enlightenment, pretty much useless for a Shadow Priest unless you're building like crazy healer heavy. You just regenerate mana faster. And maybe your build has like 2 points left over where you can't really put them anywhere very significant. Then this might be a good like trash choice where it's like, yeah, sure, I'll take 10% faster mana regen, although it doesn't really matter because I don't use mana that much. Next, we have the very controversial blowing up Twitter talent of Power Infusion, which is in the tree and is right in the middle of the tree, so it unlocks 3 options compared to 1 from the other 2. So Power Infusion, love it or hate it, it's staying in Dragonflight, at least currently. Next, we've got Twist of Fate. And there's a tooltip, not necessarily a bug, but it's unclear whether this is intended or not. The tooltip for Twist of Fate here just says, after healing a target below 35% health, you deal 10 to 20% increased damage and 10 to 20% increased healing for 10 seconds. It says nothing about doing damage to a target below 35% health. So if this is an intended change, then Twist of Fate is going to become absolute garbage, probably, for Shadow Priests, because we rarely are healing people. Unless you end up playing some of these healing talents, like maybe Prayer of Mending, for example, and you get lucky with where it goes, you're going to have way less uptime of Twist of Fate, which is, it's going to be a pretty significant nerf, or change at least, to our single target execute damage. So that could be interesting. Whether this is intended or not, like I said, unclear. And I'll let people know if we find out in the future. Next, we've got Taming the Shadows. Shadow Mend has a 15% chance to deal no damage. So instead of just changing the damage it does to you to healing, it just has a chance to not deal any damage. I don't know what happens if you take both of these, right? Like, if you have Masochism and then you also take Taming the Shadows, does this just mean you have a 15% chance to not get the heal over time, right? Hard to say. And probably, yeah, so this is one of the reasons why I think that there's probably going to be some significant changes, like, because, like, the same is true on the Shadow Tree. You can just not take Vampiric Touch at all. You can build an entire tree where you have no Vampiric Touch, and that would cause all sorts of problems, especially when you have spells that you can take that need Vampiric Touch, and you can have those spells without Vampiric Touch. It's weird. Anyway, so yeah, this one's kind of weird. Probably wouldn't ever take this Taming the Shadows thing. The damage from Shadow Mend has never mattered anyway. And then moving down to row 5, we've got Holy Nova. Pretty interesting, but pretty meh. Don't really care about it. Leap of Faith, huge. If you take Power Infusion, which you will, you're almost guaranteed to take Leap of Faith as well. Mass Dispel, also huge. Pretty much always going to take this. Mind Control, maybe not as huge. You may not end up taking this, although it unlocks... just these 2 things, which is not that big of a deal, and we'll talk about those more in a second. Shadow Fiend, again, you'll probably take this, but to take this, it means you have to take Twist of Fate, and you have to take either Mind Restraint or Improved Mind Blast. So, yeah, Shadow Fiend, you'll probably take this. We all know Shadow Fiend. We all love it. Okay, next, we've got Cleric's Armaments. Smite deals 10% additional damage while you are shielded. This is, like, way out of left field. You'll probably never use this. unless you've got like it's gonna make parsing really really weird, and it's just gonna be probably something you don't take, even if you are like a really if you do take it, you'll only take it to unlock the ones below it, and you probably won't take it unless you're like really healing heavy as a Shadow Priest, which is gonna be weird. Next we have Improved Holy Nova, not gonna be the name potentially. If your Holy Nova deals damage to at least 3 enemies, a second Holy Nova will be cast a moment later at 50% effectiveness at the same location. So it's just like a little echo. So this could be pretty cool. It just, gives you more Holy Nova damage, but it's alright. Who cares? Next, we've got Clear Mind. This is already a conduit, and it's one that I recommend a lot. Clear Mind, good. I like it. Probably worth taking if you have Mass Dispel, which you probably will. But yeah, so probably worth taking if you have, some spare points. Next, we've got Angel's Mercy. Damage you take reduces the cooldown of Desperate Prayer based on the amount of damage taken. This is big. This is like a big green flag. You probably want to take this. Desperate Prayer is a pretty big defensive, and you want to be pressing it when you're taking damage. And this talent in particular means that when you take damage, you're more likely to be able to press it, right? So that, this is just a win-win, basically. Probably will take this as well in most builds. Next, we've got Dominant Mind. You may also control your own character while Mind Control is active, but Mind Control has a 2-minute cooldown, and it may not be used against players. This one's going to be really wacky if we end up having some weird Mythic Plus cheese where you can, Mind Control a certain guy that does like a crazy spell or something. Yeah, this could be really weird, but I smell cheese here very strongly. Probably not going to be like a default go-to thing that you use all the time. Next, we've got Throes of Pain. This one's interesting. Shadow Word Pain deals an additional 5% damage over its duration. When an enemy dies while afflicted by your Shadow Word Pain, you gain 5/10% insanity and mana, 2-rank talent. So you'll notice it doesn't say or mana. This means that Disciplined Priests and Holy Priests who don't have insanity will only get mana, but Shadow Priests will get both, according to this wording, right? So this is pretty cool. Although, I mean, it's likely that if you have like Searing Nightmare or something where you have Shadow Word Pains on a lot of things and Mythic Plus and stuff starts dying, it's kind of lame that you're getting a ton of insanity as stuff is dying. Same kind of problem that Death and Madness has, where it's like, you already killed the thing, why do I need this insanity now? But it's nice that it will let you like chain into future combat, right? Like in Mythic Plus, chain into the next pack or whatever. So this is interesting. Shadow Word Pain damage is kind of anyway, so it's like not going to be a huge like 5% increased damage. Who cares? But this could be an interesting one to play with, especially the 10% mana. I mean 10% insanity. That's a lot of insanity. Improved Shadow Fiend is the next one. It's just basically what Shadow Fiend already does, which is when it hits, every time it auto attacks, you get a little bit of insanity. And this one, there's an important distinction where this one says it now restores 1% mana / a fixed amount of insanity, which I take to mean or, right? Whereas this one is and you will get both. This one is you will probably get one or the other. And I'm guessing as a Shadow Priest, you'll only get insanity. You won't get mana as well. Although, up to interpretation, I guess. Okay, next we've got Tools of the Cloth. Holy Nova deals 10% additional damage while you are shielded. This is going to cause some crazy parse strats with like, imagine Hive Mind from Nyalotha if you had Tools of the Cloth and you were just, so you had this one and you had what's the Echo one? Yeah, this one. If you had these two, you're just spamming like 100 Holy Novas all the time. I could see this being pretty crazy. Probably won't take it as a Shadow Priest. Next, you have Shackle Undead. Again, having the choice to not take this is going to be pretty cool. There's rarely times where Shackle Undead comes in really clutch. So you may or may not take this. I could see people not taking this a lot, especially because it lets you put like a point in Prayer of Mending, for example, or something else. So yeah, Shackle Undead, nice that it's an option and isn't gatekeeping anything else. Then you've got Twins of the Sun Priestess, which again, red alert, this is a very controversial thing, especially considering you must take it if you want either mind games or this whole side of the tree. So yeah, I mean, Power Infusion being in this node in particular, I mean, Twins of the Sun Priestess is very controversial. Anyway, Twins of the Sun Priestess, yeah, if you're taking Power Infusion, you will also very likely take Twins of the Sun Priestess, both ranks if you can, because having 2 Power Infusions is crazy, especially because it forces you to get your own. And I know that's a huge problem for a lot of Shadow Priests, especially in lower ranked guilds where raid leaders have the power to just say, you're giving it to me or I'm kicking you, right? You can still give it to them and you can get it yourself, which is a little nice little crumb that they're giving to people who are forced into that situation, right? Next, you have Puppet Master, Shadow Fiend, and Dominant Mind increase your mastery by 3/6% while active. So this is interesting. More mastery is always good, at least in the current iteration of Shadow Priest. So this could be a pretty good damage talent. Next, we've got Blessing of Renewal. It heals for an additional, or Renew heals for an additional 5%, and its mana cost is reduced by 10%. Probably won't end up down here as a Shadow Priest. Charitable Soul, casting Power Word Shield on an ally also shields you for however much, 5 or 10% of the amount for 10 seconds. Probably won't take this as a Shadow Priest, because you're probably going to be casting Power Word Shield on yourself because of this body and soul thing. Oh, that's what it's called. Light's Inspiration is the Desperate Prayer conduit thing. Next, we've got Translucent Image. Almost guaranteed to take this as well, because if you could have this as well as Masochism, you could have some serious damage reduction going on top of our already pretty good self-healing. So yeah, probably will take Translucent Image most of the time, and considering the things below it are good. And then next you've got Mindbender. So if you do want to end up playing that Shadow Flame Prism playstyle, you'll end up down here where you take Mindbender, you'll take this Rabid Shadows, which is just the conduit, and you'll take Shadow Flame Prism, the legendary power, of course. Okay, so next for the second to last row, we've got Unwavering Will, which just reduces the cast time of some healing spells while you're above 75% health. You will not take this as a Shadow Priest pretty much ever. Then you've got Light's Inspiration, which is just that Desperate Prayer conduit. Pretty dope, but sad that it has to be over here because you probably don't want to take this other stuff in this row, but maybe you could take this. And then you've got Tithe Evasion. Shadow Word Death deals 10% or 20% less damage to the caster. Oh yeah, this is a good change. It really is rough when you're in like Torghast or on like a boss that has increased damage taken modifiers, and you hit it with a 35k Shadow Word Death that just comes back and trucks you for 35k. That really sucks. So having this is nice because it's gonna deal less, and on top of this, with a well-timed fade, you can make it even more reduced. And let's say you Shadow Mend yourself, fade, and then hit a crazy Shadow Word Death, you could reduce like 50% of the damage you take back from that Shadow Word Death, and that's pretty cool. And then yeah, you've got Rabid Shadows. For the final ones, we've got Holy Word Life. This one sounds really cool. It's a word of holy power that heals the target. If the target is not below 20% health, the caster takes damage equal to the amount healed. So it's basically the opposite of Shadow Word Death. Healing is increased by 150% to targets below 20% health. It's instant cast on a 30-second cooldown. It's sad that Shadow Priests will probably not use this very much, but I think this is a really cool spell. Although, if I were a healer, I would probably not think that because it's very similar to the problems I have with Shadow Word Death. Okay, so then next we've got Crystalline Reflection. Pretty lame in my opinion. Power Word Shield instantly heals the target for some amount, 514 currently, and reflects 20% of damage absorbed. That's kind of cool. Seems more like a PvP thing to me. Then we've got Mind Games, which is just Mind Games, which is really dope. Probably will take this most of the time. And then you've got Shadow Flame Prism. Again, super dope. Probably will take this most of the time. And that's without even talking about any of the Shadow Tree talents. So, those are my thoughts on the Priest Tree so far. Again, like I said, things are very likely to change in the coming weeks, coming months before Dragonflight. I want to apologize for being so AFK on this channel. I'd like to get some videos coming again. Keep an eye out for the Shadow Tree video that I'm going to make. Check the description for links to my Twitch, my Discord, that kind of thing. Leave a like if you liked the video, subscribe if you really liked it, maybe share it with your friends, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!